The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a deep hum that echoed through the vast hall. Ambassador Zexithara walked forward on her 6 legs, her crystalline body catching the light from 1,000 different worlds. Behind her, representatives from 11 other species sat in their designated areas, all watching with eager anticipation. Today would mark another victory for the Council. Another species would bow to their authority and join the galactic community under proper supervision. The humans had been isolated for 3 months now, cut off from all trade and communication with the rest of the galaxy. No species had ever lasted longer than 2 months before begging for mercy. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, staring out at the alien ships that surrounded human space like a metal wall. The blockade stretched across every jump point, every trade route, every path that led to human colonies. Hundreds of ships from different worlds, all working together to squeeze humanity into submission. "Sir, we're getting another transmission from the Council," said Lieutenant Amy Barnes from her position at the communications station. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls, but her voice stayed calm and professional. "Put it through, Amy," Jake replied, settling back in his command chair. He had been expecting this call. 3 months of blockade meant the aliens were probably getting impatient. The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the Council chamber. Ambassador Zexithara stepped forward, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority that came from ruling half the galaxy. "Humans of Earth and the colonial worlds," she began, her translated words filling the bridge of every human ship. "The Galactic Council has been patient with your species. We have offered you membership in our community. We have offered you protection, trade, and the wisdom of civilizations that are millions of years older than yours." Jake watched the alien ambassador speak, noting how confident she seemed. The other council members sat behind her, some looking bored, others appearing mildly interested. None of them looked worried. However, Zexithara continued, "Your refusal to accept council authority cannot continue. You have been given time to consider your position. That time has ended." On the human colony world of New Boston, Governor Linda Hayes watched the transmission in her office. Outside her window, she could see the city going about its daily business. People walked the streets, children played in parks, and construction crews worked on new buildings. The blockade might as well have been happening in another galaxy. "The terms are simple," the ambassador said, her crystalline features catching the chamber's light. "Humanity will accept full council oversight of your government, your military, and your expansion into space. You will submit to our guidance in all matters of technology, trade, and diplomacy. Your weapons will be surrendered to council forces. Your colonies will accept council governors." Lieutenant Amy Barnes glanced at Captain Morrison, but his expression didn't change. He had heard these demands before, though never stated so bluntly. "In return," Zexithara added, "your species will be protected from the dangers of uncontrolled expansion. You will be given access to council markets and technology. Your people will be safe under our authority." The chamber fell silent as the ambassador paused for effect. This was always the moment when the stubborn species finally understood their situation, the moment when reality set in and they realized they had no choice but to surrender. "You have 72 standard hours to signal your acceptance of these terms," she announced. "If you refuse, the council will have no choice but to take more direct action. Your blockade will become a quarantine. Your ships will be seized. Your colonies will be occupied for their own protection." Dr. Helen Ross sat in her small apartment on the neutral station where she had been staying since her expulsion from council space. As humanity's former ambassador, she understood exactly what the council was threatening. Direct action meant invasion. It meant the end of human independence forever. The transmission continued with Zexithara listing the specific details of surrender. Human fleets would gather at designated points for inspection and disarmament. Colonial governments would step down in favor of council administrators. Earth itself would accept a council oversight committee to ensure compliance with galactic law. "These terms are generous," the ambassador concluded. "The council has shown remarkable patience with your species. Do not mistake our restraint for weakness. You have seen what happens to worlds that defy our authority. Accept our guidance and prosper. Refuse and face the consequences of your pride." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in expectant silence. Representatives began murmuring among themselves, discussing how quickly the humans would respond and what level of council oversight would be required. On the Liberty's bridge, Jake Morrison stood up and walked to the communications station. Amy, get me a direct line to Admiral Carter at Fleet Command. Yes, sir, she replied, her fingers dancing over the controls. Within moments, the stern face of Admiral Lisa Carter appeared on the screen. Jake, she said simply, I assume you saw the transmission. Every word of it, he replied. What are your orders, Admiral? Lisa Carter had been with the Colonial Defense Force since its founding. She had fought pirates, explored unknown systems, and helped establish humanity's first colonies beyond Earth. She had also been watching the Council's expansion for years, studying their methods and their demands. The President and the Colonial Council have made their decision, she said. Send the response. Jake nodded to Amy, who opened a channel to the Council chamber. The alien representatives looked up expectantly as the human signal came through their communication systems. Admiral Carter's image appeared on their screens, her uniform crisp and her expression calm. She looked directly into the camera and threw it at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. To the Galactic Council, she said in a clear, steady voice. Humanity has carefully considered your ultimatum. We have discussed your terms and your threats. We have weighed your offers against our principles. The council chamber was completely silent now. Every representative leaned forward, waiting for the inevitable acceptance speech they had heard so many times before. We respectfully decline, Admiral Carter said. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the council in stunned silence. Zexathara stared at the blank screen, her crystalline features reflecting her confusion. Never in the entire recorded history of the Galactic Council had a species simply said no to their ultimate demand. In the chamber, confused murmurs began to grow louder. Representatives turned to each other, seeking explanations that none of them could provide. The humans had just done something impossible. They had refused to surrender. High Counselor Thekmaran's tentacles writhed in agitation as he called for order in the chamber. The massive amphibian had presided over council sessions for over 2 centuries, but he had never encountered a situation like this. Species simply did not refuse council ultimatums. It was unthinkable. There must be some mistake, declared Counselor Vashaniri, her aquatic form shifting nervously in her water-filled containment suit. Perhaps their translation systems malfunctioned. No species in their right mind would refuse our protection when faced with these circumstances. Ambassador Zexathara stood motionless, her crystalline body still reflecting the chamber lights, but her usual confidence had evaporated. I transmitted the message in their primary language, she said slowly. There was no translation error. They understood our terms perfectly. Across the galaxy, Dr. Helen Ross received an encrypted communication in her modest quarters on Neutral Station 7. The message was brief and came through channels that officially didn't exist. The council wanted to speak with her immediately. Within hours, she found herself back in the council chamber for the first time since her expulsion. The assembled representatives looked at her with a mixture of hope and desperation. If anyone could explain human behavior, it would be their former ambassador. Dr. Ross, High Counselor Thekmaran began, his voice carrying undertones of frustration. Your species has responded to our generous offer in a way that defies all logic. Surely they misunderstood the severity of their situation. Helen looked around the chamber at faces that showed confusion, anger, and growing concern. These beings had controlled galactic politics for millennia through a simple formula. Overwhelming force followed by generous terms of surrender. It had never failed before. With respect, Counselor, she replied carefully. I believe the humans understood your message perfectly. They simply chose to reject it. Chose to reject it? Counselor Drakthul of the military caste rose from his seat, his armored form towering over the other representatives. They control 5-star systems. We control 17. They have perhaps 200 ships. We have thousands. What possible basis could they have for such a choice? Dr. Ross had spent years trying to explain human nature to the council, often without success. Humans have a concept called principle, she said. Sometimes they make decisions based on what they believe is right, rather than what might be practical or safe. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. The concept was as alien to most council species as breathing underwater was to humans. Their civilizations had evolved through compromise, submission to authority, and practical acceptance of superior force. Meanwhile, on the human colony world of New Texas, Governor Rick Johnson was having a very different conversation. His office was filled with holographic displays, showing the status of every human settlement. And the news was surprisingly good. The Centauri colonies report they've achieved complete food independence, announced his aide, Maria Lopez. The mining operations in the Vega system have increased output by 30%, and the manufacturing centers on New Detroit are ahead of schedule on everything from clothing to ship components. Rick leaned back in his chair, a slight smile on his weathered face. What about morale? That's the strangest part, Maria admitted. Across all colonies, morale is actually up. People seem energized by the challenge. There are volunteers for everything, and productivity has increased across the board. Back in Council space, Commander Steve Taylor was leading a reconnaissance mission along the blockade perimeter. His ship, the UES Ranger, was one of the newer human vessels, designed specifically for long-range scouting and intelligence gathering. Commander, called his sensor operator, Petty Officer Nancy Green, I'm picking up some unusual movement from the Council fleet. Steve moved to her station and studied the displays. The alien ships were repositioning themselves, tightening their formation around the jump points leading to human space. They're expecting us to try something, he observed. Try what, sir? Asked his executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Bill Watson. That's just it, Steve replied. I don't think they understand that we're not trying to break through their blockade. We're ignoring it. The confusion was spreading through the Council fleet as well. Admiral Kethavoran of the Hegemony Fleet had commanded blockades before, and human behavior was completely outside his experience. Normally, by this point, the besieged species would be sending desperate messages, pleading for negotiation or attempting desperate breakout runs. The humans were doing none of these things. Their ships continued regular patrols within their own space, apparently unconcerned by the massive fleet surrounding them. Their communications remained routine and professional. Most disturbing of all, their colonies seemed to be functioning normally. Admiral, reported his intelligence officer, our long-range sensors are detecting increased activity throughout human space. Construction projects, mining operations, manufacturing facilities. They appear to be expanding their infrastructure rather than preparing for surrender. Kethavoran studied the reports with growing unease. In his experience, besieged species either collapsed quickly or fought desperately. They didn't calmly go about improving their living conditions. President Karen Williams addressed the human colonies from her office in New Washington, Earth's capital. The broadcast somehow reached every human settlement, despite the Council's attempts to jam communications. Her message was calm, measured, and completely unlike what the Council expected from a leader under siege. My fellow humans, she began, the Galactic Council believes they can force us to accept their authority through isolation and threats. They believe we are like every other species they have encountered. They believe we will surrender our freedom for the promise of safety. On the frontier world of Haven, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Baker watched the broadcast with his staff. Outside the command center, construction crews were working on new defensive installations. But the mood was more like a community project than a desperate military buildup. They are about to learn, President Williams continued, that humanity has never responded well to bullies. We did not leave Earth and settle new worlds just to hand our freedom over to whoever claims authority over us. We came to the stars to build something better. The broadcast was monitored by Council intelligence services, and the recordings were rushed to the chamber where the emergency session continued. The representatives watched in growing bewilderment as the human leader spoke not of surrender or negotiation, but of resistance and independence. This is unprecedented, muttered Councillor Yithnaka of the Traders Guild. Where is their fear? Where is their desperation? They speak as if they have options. Dr. Ross watched the recording with a mixture of pride and worry. She knew the Council well enough to understand that confusion would eventually turn to anger, and anger could lead to actions that would harm everyone. Councilors, she said carefully, I need to warn you about something. Humans view your blockade not as a negotiating tactic, but as an act of war. They are not preparing to surrender. They are preparing to fight. Fight? Councillor Vashaniri's aquatic form rippled with what might have been laughter. With what? Against whom? We outnumber them 10-1. That's exactly the kind of odds humans prefer, Dr. Ross replied quietly. They have a saying, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. As reports continued to flood in from the blockade fleet, A disturbing pattern emerged. Human ships weren't trying to escape or attack. They were conducting routine patrols, training exercises, and what appeared to be normal fleet operations. It was as if the blockade simply didn't exist in their planning. High Counselor Thekmarin called for another recess as the chamber descended into chaos. Representatives demanded explanations. Military advisors insisted on stronger action, and everyone seemed to be talking at once. For the first time in Council history, they were dealing with a species that genuinely didn't want to join their galactic community. More importantly, it was becoming clear that the humans had never intended to negotiate at all. They had been planning for this moment from the beginning. What the Galactic Council interpreted as stubborn defiance was actually something far more dangerous: humanity operating at full capacity with a clear purpose. Across human space, the response to the Council's ultimatum was not panic or desperation, but organized determination. President Karen Williams stood before the cameras in her office, knowing that her words would somehow reach every human settlement despite the alien blockade. The technical staff had worked miracles with quantum communication arrays and relay stations hidden throughout human space. "Citizens of Earth and the colonies," she began, her voice steady and confident. 3 months ago, the Galactic Council declared their intention to rule over us. They believed that cutting us off from the galaxy would force us to our knees. They believed we would beg for their protection and accept their control. On the agricultural world of New Kansas, Farmer Tom Bradley watched the broadcast while standing in fields that stretched to the horizon. The crops were the best he had ever grown, and the community had never been more united. The Council's blockade had forced them to rely on each other, and they had discovered they were stronger than anyone had imagined. They made a critical error in judgment, President Williams continued. They assumed we were like every other species they had conquered. They assumed we needed them more than they needed us. They were wrong on both counts. Captain Dan Murphy commanded the science vessel UES Discovery, currently in orbit around the research station at Wolf 359. His ship had been working with Dr. Jennifer Morgan on what the Council's intelligence reports had dismissed as minor civilian research projects. The aliens were about to learn how wrong their intelligence had been. "Dr. Morgan," Dan said, reviewing the latest test results, "are you telling me we can actually manufacture anything we need with these quantum fabricators?" Jennifer smiled as she pulled up the production reports on her tablet. "Not just anything, Captain. We can make it better, faster, and more efficiently than anything the Council species produce. 3 months of forced independence has given us exactly what we needed: motivation to perfect our technology." The psychological impact on Council forces was becoming impossible to ignore. Admiral Kethavoran had commanded blockades against 7 different species during his career, and he had never seen anything like human behavior. His crews were reporting that human ships continued normal operations, as if the blockade simply didn't exist. "Admiral," reported his communications officer, "we're intercepting human fleet communications again. They're discussing training schedules, equipment maintenance, and something called expansion protocols." "Expansion protocols?" Kethavoran's armored features showed his confusion. "They're surrounded by our fleet. What are they planning to expand?" On the frontier world of Haven, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Baker was discovering the answer to that question. His long-range scouts had been reporting unusual activity in systems beyond the Council's blockade perimeter. Systems that were supposed to be empty. "Colonel," reported Major Susan Clark, his intelligence officer, "we've confirmed it. There are human settlements in at least 6 systems that aren't on any Council charts. They've been there for months, maybe longer." Paul studied the star charts with growing amazement. While the Council had been focused on the known human colonies, humanity had been quietly expanding into unclaimed space. The blockade had only cut off the tip of the iceberg. "How many people are we talking about?" he asked. "Conservative estimate? About 2 million humans in settlements the Council doesn't even know exist," Susan replied. "And they're all connected by communication networks the aliens can't detect or intercept. Back on Earth, in a secure facility beneath the Swiss Alps, Dr. Kevin Lee was putting the finishing touches on humanity's greatest secret project. The quantum manufacturing complex stretched for miles underground, powered by fusion reactors that could run for centuries without maintenance. "Final tests complete," announced his assistant, Engineer Carol Davis. We can now produce everything from basic supplies to starship components without any external resources. The colonies will never need to import anything again. The revelation was spreading through human space like wildfire. Not only were they surviving the blockade, they were thriving. Admiral Tony Clark, commanding the human defense fleet from his flagship UES Defiance, had been coordinating with colony governments to implement something they called the Independence Protocol. "All colonial governors report ready," announced his aide, Commander Lisa Park. "Manufacturing is at 120% of pre-blockade levels. Food production has exceeded all projections, and morale across all settlements is higher than it's ever been." Tony allowed himself a rare smile. "Send the message to President Williams. Tell her we're ready for Phase 2. The Council was about to learn that humanity's response to their ultimatum had been carefully planned for months. While the aliens had been congratulating themselves on their superior strategy, humans had been preparing for complete independence from galactic civilization. Major Rachel Stone, the Defense Force's chief tactical analyst, had predicted the Council's blockade strategy with uncanny accuracy. Her analysis of alien behavior patterns had allowed humanity to prepare for every move the Council might make. "They're predictable," she had told the Colonial Defense Committee 6 months earlier. "They've used the same tactics for thousands of years because they've always worked. Cut off trade, threaten invasion, accept surrender. They have no backup plan because they've never needed one." Now, as human colonies reported success after success, it was becoming clear that Rachel's predictions had been absolutely correct. The Council had no idea how to deal with a species that refused to follow their script. President Williams prepared for the broadcast that would change everything. The message would be transmitted on all frequencies in all languages to every corner of Council space. It was time to let the galaxy know that humanity was no longer interested in joining their club. "My fellow humans," she began, "and to any other species who might be listening, I want to make our position absolutely clear. The Galactic Council demanded our surrender. They threatened our destruction if we refused to accept their authority. On distant Council ships, communications officers scrambled to record and translate the unexpected human broadcast. The transmission was being sent on frequencies that should have been impossible for humans to access. We thank them for their ultimatum," President Williams continued, "because it gave us exactly what we needed, a reason to stop depending on anyone but ourselves. For 3 months, we have proven that humanity doesn't need the Council's protection, their trade, or their guidance." The implications were staggering. If humans could survive and prosper in isolation, what did that say about the Council's claims that membership was necessary for survival? What did it say about their authority over other species? "We have achieved complete self-sufficiency in food, manufacturing, technology, and defense," the President announced. "Our colonies are growing stronger every day. Our people are united in a way that wouldn't have been possible without the Council's blockade." Captain Mary Foster, commanding the UES Defiance on patrol near the Tau Ceti system, received new orders that made her grin with anticipation. Her ship was one of the newest in the human fleet, equipped with technology the Council had never seen. "Navigation, set course for the Kepler system," she ordered. "It's time to show our neighbors that their blockade has become irrelevant." The final part of President Williams's broadcast sent shockwaves through Council space. "To the Galactic Council, we offer this message. Your blockade is no longer relevant to our interests. We decline to recognize your authority over human space. Any Council ships found in our territory will be asked to leave. Any species wishing to establish peaceful relations with humanity is welcome to contact us directly." The transmission ended with coordinates to human space, and an open invitation that would terrify the Council more than any military threat. Other species were being invited to bypass Council authority entirely. For the first time in galactic history, someone was offering an alternative to Council membership, and that someone had just proven they could back up their offer with complete independence. The age of automatic Council supremacy was about to end, not with a bang, but with a simple human word: no. The Council's confidence began to crack when their deep space monitoring stations started detecting energy signatures that shouldn't have existed. Massive power readings were coming from systems that were supposed to contain only small human settlements. Worse yet, some of the readings were coming from systems that weren't supposed to have any human presence at all. Commander Sarah Johnson stood in the primary laboratory of Research Station Omega, a facility that didn't appear on any Council intelligence reports. Hidden in the asteroid belt of an unremarkable star system, the station had been operating in complete secrecy for over 2 years. Final tests confirm it, she announced to her team. The quantum manufacturing network is fully operational across all human space. We can now produce anything from food to starship hulls without importing a single component. Her assistant, Dr. Marcus Chen, pulled up the production reports on the main display. The colonies are reporting manufacturing capacity at levels that exceed pre-blockade imports by over 300%. We're not just independent, Sarah. We're more productive than we've ever been. The revelation struck the Council like a physical blow when their intelligence services finally decoded what the energy signatures meant. Humanity hadn't just been preparing to survive the blockade. They had been preparing to make it completely irrelevant. High Counselor Thekmaran reviewed the reports with growing horror. These power readings indicate industrial capacity on a scale we never imagined possible. How long have they been building these facilities? Based on the quantum signature analysis, replied the Council's chief science advisor. Some of these installations have been under construction for over 3 years. They began this project long before we implemented the blockade. The implications were terrifying. Humanity hadn't been reacting to Council pressure. They had been anticipating it and preparing accordingly. The blockade wasn't forcing them to surrender. It was giving them cover to complete their independence project. Dr. Kevin Lee received a priority message from Earth Command while overseeing the final phase of Project Liberation. The underground manufacturing complex now stretched across 3 continents, connected by quantum communication networks that operated faster than anything the Council possessed. Dr. Lee, the message read, Phase 2 is authorized. Begin full implementation of the expansion protocol. Kevin smiled as he activated systems that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. Within hours, quantum manufacturing networks began operating in every human settlement, turning colonies that had been dependent on trade into completely self-sufficient worlds. But the real shock came when Admiral Tony Clark received authorization to implement what human military planners called the Revelation Protocol. It was time to show the Council exactly what humanity had been building during their months of supposed isolation. All ships. This is Admiral Clark, he broadcast to the human fleet. Operation Independence is now active. Begin standard patrols in all systems marked for human expansion. Captain Mary Foster, commanding the UES Defiance, was among the first to receive new patrol orders. Her destination was a system the Council considered to be within their exclusive zone of influence. When she arrived, she found something that would have been impossible 3 months earlier. Admiral, she reported back to Fleet Command, I'm looking at a fully operational human colony in the Vega secondary system. Population appears to be around 50,000. They have mining operations, manufacturing facilities, and defensive installations that are more advanced than anything in our official records. The discovery sent shockwaves through Council intelligence. Humanity hadn't just been hiding their preparations for independence. They had been expanding into unclaimed space while the Council focused on blockading their known territories. Major Rachel Stone, analyzing the strategic situation from Earth Command, felt a deep satisfaction as her predictions proved accurate. They fell for it completely, she told her staff. While they were watching our front door, we were building a dozen back doors they never knew existed. The Council's military leaders were beginning to understand the magnitude of their miscalculation. Admiral Keth Voran called an emergency conference with his fleet. Commanders, as reports flooded in from across Council space. Humans are operating in 17 systems we thought were uninhabited, he announced. They have colonies, industrial facilities, and what appear to be significant defensive installations. Our blockade has been targeting less than half of their actual territory. The revelation got worse as more reports arrived. Commander Steve Taylor, leading an expanded reconnaissance mission, discovered that human settlements were connected by communication networks that operated outside of Council-monitored space. Worse yet, these networks appeared to be more advanced than anything the Council possessed. They're not just independent, he reported to Admiral Clark. They're technologically superior to us in several key areas. Their quantum communication systems are faster than our best equipment by orders of magnitude. Dr. Jennifer Morgan, working from her laboratory on the research vessel UES Discovery, was putting the finishing touches on technology that would render Council military advantages meaningless. Her breakthroughs in defensive systems meant that human colonies could protect themselves against forces many times their size. "Captain Murphy," she announced, "the planetary defense networks are online in all major colonies. Any Council force attempting invasion would face defensive systems they've never encountered before." But perhaps the most significant development was happening in the Council's own territory. Reports began filtering in from across galactic civilization that other species were starting to ask questions about Council Authority. President Karen Williams had authorized the transmission of detailed information about human achievements to any species that requested it. The message was simple: independence was possible, and humanity was willing to help others achieve it. Ambassador Jack Adams, Dr. Helen Ross's replacement, delivered humanity's final diplomatic message to the Council from a secure location that Council forces couldn't trace. The message was transmitted directly into the Council chamber during their emergency session. "To the esteemed members of the Galactic Council," he began, his image appearing on screens throughout the chamber. "Humanity wishes to clarify our position regarding your recent ultimatum." The Council representatives watched in stunned silence as the human ambassador spoke with calm confidence from what appeared to be the bridge of a ship more advanced than anything in their fleets. "We appreciate your offer of membership in your organization," Jack continued, "but we must respectfully decline. Humanity has chosen a different path, one that doesn't require surrendering our independence to any external authority." Councillor Drakthul rose from his seat, his armored form radiating anger. "You speak of independence while surrounded by our fleets. Your defiance is meaningless." "With respect, Councillor," Jack replied with a slight smile, "your fleets are not surrounding us. They are monitoring a small portion of human space while the majority of our civilization operates freely in systems you've never investigated." The chamber erupted in confused voices as the implications became clear. The Council had been fighting a shadow while the real target operated beyond their reach. "Furthermore," Jack continued, "we would like to extend an invitation to any species currently under Council authority who might prefer to govern themselves. Humanity has proven that independence is not only possible but preferable to submission." The final blow came when Jack transmitted coordinates to human space and detailed information about their achievements in manufacturing, defense, and expansion. The message included technical specifications that proved human technology had advanced beyond Council capabilities in multiple areas. Any species wishing to discuss alternatives to Council membership are welcome to visit our territories, he concluded. "Unlike the Council, we do not require submission as a prerequisite for dialogue." As the transmission ended, the Council chamber fell into chaos. Representatives shouted over each other, demanding explanations and solutions that no one could provide. For the first time in their recorded history, they faced a species that not only refused to join their organization, but was actively offering membership in an alternative. High Councillor Thekmaran called for order, but his authority was crumbling along with the Council's monopoly on galactic civilization. Reports were already coming in that several species had requested more information about human independence. The blockade that was supposed to force human surrender had instead given humanity time and motivation to become completely self-sufficient. Worse yet, it had provided them with a powerful example to show other species resistance was possible, and the Council was not invincible. The age of automatic Council authority was ending, destroyed not by military conquest but by humanity's simple refusal to accept that their way was the only way. The Galactic Council faced complete collapse as the reality of their situation became undeniable. Emergency sessions devolved into chaos while species that had submitted to Council authority for millennia began to question everything they had been told about the necessity of galactic government. Councillor Drakthul of the military Cass stood before the assembled representatives, his armored form trembling with rage and confusion. "This is impossible," he declared. "No species achieves this level of independence without our guidance. Their technology shouldn't be superior to ours. Their expansion shouldn't have been possible under our monitoring. Yet here we are," replied Councillor Vashaniri, her aquatic form rippling with what might have been despair, "facing a species that has not only rejected our authority, but proven they never needed it in the first place." The panic was spreading beyond the Council chamber. Across galactic civilization, species that had been members for thousands of years were receiving detailed reports about human achievements. The technical specifications humanity had shared showed manufacturing capabilities, defensive systems, and expansion protocols that surpassed anything the Council offered its members. Captain Bill Turner commanded the human patrol, vessel UES Independence on what had become a routine mission through systems the Council once considered their exclusive territory. His ship was one of dozens now operating freely in space that had been off-limits to humanity just months before. Captain, reported his navigation officer, Lieutenant Kate Wilson, we're receiving a priority transmission from an unknown source. It's not Council, and it's not from human space. Bill studied the communication data with interest. Put it through, but keep our defenses ready. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of an alien vessel unlike anything in the Council fleet. The being speaking was clearly reptilian, with scales that shifted color as emotions played across his features. Human vessel, the alien began. I am Captain Sith Nala of the Corvan Republic. My government has been monitoring your conflict with the Council. We request permission to discuss matters of mutual interest. Bill exchanged glances with his executive officer, Commander Ruth Hayes. The Corvan Republic wasn't in any of their databases, which meant they were dealing with a species that had somehow remained hidden from Council authority. Permission granted, Bill replied. Are you looking for assistance with something? On the contrary, Sith Nala said, his scales shifting to what appeared to be an expression of satisfaction. We wish to offer our assistance to you. The Corvan Republic has been independent from Council authority for over 2 centuries. We would like to discuss the formation of a mutual defense alliance. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't the only species that had rejected Council authority. There were others, and they had been waiting for someone strong enough to challenge the Council's monopoly on galactic civilization. Dr. Helen Ross, monitoring the situation from her position as humanity's liaison to neutral species, received reports that made her realize the full scope of what was happening. The human example wasn't just inspiring questions about Council authority. It was revealing the existence of entire civilizations that had successfully maintained their independence. At least 6 species have now requested detailed information about human achievements, she reported to President Williams. But more importantly, 3 species have revealed that they've been operating independently from the Council for decades or centuries. We're not alone out here. The Council's intelligence services were overwhelmed by reports they couldn't explain or contain. Species after species was either requesting information about independence or revealing that they had never fully submitted to Council authority in the first place. High Counselor, Tekmaran called an emergency session as the crisis deepened. The situation is beyond containment, he announced to the assembled representatives. 17 species have formally requested information about alternatives to Council membership. 8 species have revealed significant autonomous operations we were unaware of, and 3 species have announced their intention to withdraw from Council authority entirely. Councillor Yithnaka of the Traders Guild was reviewing economic reports that painted an even bleaker picture. Trade revenues have dropped by 40% as species begin establishing direct relationships with humanity. Our monopoly on interspecies commerce is collapsing. The military situation was even worse. Admiral Kethavoran reported that maintaining the blockade had become pointless since it only affected a fraction of human territory. Worse yet, human ships were now operating freely throughout Council space, and several species were requesting human assistance with their own independence movements. They're not invading our territory, he explained to the military council. They're being invited in by our own member species. We can't classify them as hostile when they're responding to official requests for assistance. Captain Mary Foster, commanding the UES Defiance on patrol near the former Council stronghold system of Rigel, encountered something that would have been impossible under the old galactic order. A mixed fleet of ships from 6 different species was conducting joint exercises, all of them flying under the banner of something called the Independent Worlds Alliance. Admiral Clark, she reported, you need to see this. The Alliance fleet includes Corvan, Zephyrian, and Altarian ships alongside 3 other species I don't recognize. They're using human-designed communication protocols and defensive formations. The revelation that humanity had sparked the formation of an alternative to Council authority sent shockwaves through galactic civilization. The Independent Worlds Alliance wasn't just a military partnership. It was a complete alternative to the Council system, based on voluntary cooperation rather than enforced submission. President Williams addressed the galaxy from Earth, her broadcast reaching every corner of known space despite Council attempts to jam the transmission. The quantum communication networks humanity had developed were now being shared with allied species, creating an information network the Council couldn't control. To all species considering their relationship with galactic authority, she began, humanity extends an invitation to join us in building something better. The Independent Worlds Alliance offers all the benefits of galactic civilization without the requirement to surrender your freedom. The Council's response was swift, but ineffective. They declared the alliance to be a legal organization and demanded that all member species immediately cease contact with human representatives. The declaration was ignored by every species it was intended to control. Ambassador Jack Adams, now operating from the Alliance's new diplomatic station in the Vega system, delivered humanity's final message to the Council. The station itself was a symbol of the new reality, a massive facility built by 6 different species working together as equals. To the Galactic Council, he announced during a broadcast that reached every inhabited world, the galaxy has moved beyond your authority. Species across the galaxy have discovered that they don't need your protection, your guidance, or your permission to prosper. The evidence was overwhelming. Alliance worlds were reporting higher standards of living, more advanced technology, and greater freedoms than they had ever enjoyed under Council rule. The human example had proven that independence wasn't just possible, it was superior to submission. The Independent Worlds Alliance extends an open invitation to any species seeking true self-determination, Jack continued. We offer partnership without domination, assistance without control, and prosperity without the surrender of sovereignty. Dr. Kevin Lee, coordinating the expansion of quantum manufacturing networks across Alliance space, reported achievements that would have been unthinkable under Council restrictions. We're sharing our most advanced technologies with any species that requests them, he announced. No licenses, no restrictions, no requirements for political submission. Just free exchange between equals. The final blow to Council authority came when 3 of their oldest member species formally announced their withdrawal from Council membership to join the Alliance. The Centaurian Confederation, the Vegan Trade Federation, and the Sirius Colonial Union all cited the same reason. They had discovered that independence offered opportunities the Council had never provided. High Counselor Tekmaran faced the empty seats where those delegations had once sat, and realized that the Council's authority was crumbling faster than anyone had imagined possible. The human refusal to negotiate had exposed the fundamental weakness in their system. It only worked when everyone believed there was no alternative. The humans have destroyed everything we built, he said quietly to the remaining representatives, not through conquest or war, but by proving that our way was never the only way. The blockade ships that had once surrounded human space began to disperse as their crews realized they were guarding nothing. Humanity had moved beyond the need for Council permission to exist. They had built something better, something that other species wanted to join rather than being forced to accept. Captain Bill Turner, now commanding an Alliance patrol fleet that included ships from 7 different species, received a message that symbolized the complete transformation of galactic civilization. A Council world was wrecked.